Hey, welcome to 12 Tone. It's another Q&A, and joining me to read the questions is my friend Jabril from the YouTube channel Jabrils. Take it away.
Yo, Corey, Matt's asked, what's your favorite rhythm?
I guess it depends how you look at it. The rhythmic device I find myself gravitating towards most often is the tresillo, which sounds like this. I really enjoy the sort of lurching feel it has, like the notes are a bit too long to fit the groove and they have to keep rushing to catch up. My single favorite rhythm I've ever worked with, though, is this pattern in 1916, which I layered with a second accent pattern to make things even harder. That song actually used 6 different time signatures, and it made my band really mad. Next question.
Tamaz Mazarek asked, what exactly is a raga?
Alright, so first of all, an important disclaimer. I am not an expert on Indian classical music, and this answer should not be viewed as a complete explanation of the raga system. That said, I'll do my best. Ragas are often described as the Indian version of scales, and that's not an unreasonable starting point. Like a scale, a raga is a set of notes with which you can write music, but it's also a whole lot more. Ragas contain not just sets of notes, but also instructions on how to use them. We have some of this in Western scales. For instance, in E major, the note D sharp is said to want to resolve up to E. But ragas are much more detailed, including specific orders in which notes tend to be played, as well as characteristic melodic ideas that give the raga its unique identity. Many ragas even include multiple versions of certain notes depending on how they're approached. There's still a lot of room for creativity within ragas, but they provide a bit more structure than Western scales tend to. Next question.
Christian Killer asked, in your opinion, what is the most versatile instrument?
My first instinct is the piano. It has one of the widest ranges of any instrument in the world, and its original name, pianoforte, literally means soft loud and comes from the fact that it can play soft, loud, or anywhere in between, letting it play all sorts of songs in all sorts of styles. In terms of arrangement, it allows you to play many notes at once, so it can accompany itself perfectly fine, but it can also fit well in the background of a larger orchestration. Plus, if we include the family of electronic keyboards, it can sound like anything you can synthesize. Next question.
Akiva Weinberger asked, why stay in one key? Is it just a matter of it being easier to write?
So I think this is looking at things the wrong way. A better question, I believe, would be why not stay in one key? Complexity is a tool, and it should be used when necessary, but adding complexity for its own sake rarely improves a work of art. There's a great quote by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, author of Le Petit Prince. It seems that perfection is attained not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing more to remove. Although, of course, he said it in French. That's not to say don't change keys. Modulation is a really useful technique for a lot of different artistic goals. Just wait until you have a good reason to do it. Next question.
Ender Smith asked, I really enjoyed the first week of Talking Music. How do you feel it went?
So for those of you who missed the announcement, Talking Music is a new project I started over on Twitter where a different music educator takes over the account each week to talk about their perspective on music. I took the first week and I'm really happy with how it went, but more importantly, I've been really impressed with what's happened since. We had one host who talked about how video game music was made, one who dove into the practice of improvisation, and the current one, who as of this writing has just started, is my friend Steve from the Listener's Guide, who's focusing on politics and diversity in music. My only real worry at this point is that we're not getting a lot of new signups, so if that sounds like the sort of thing you might want to take part in, I've linked to the application form in the description. Next.
Justin Strawhan asked, is there any academic work on the music theory of punk music?
So I've done some digging, and while there seems to be a fair amount of papers on punk by musicologists exploring the culture of punk and its impact on the world around it, as well as some about the concept of punk pedagogy, or bringing the philosophy of punk into the music classroom, there's very little I could find about the theory and composition of the music itself. That said, punk music is over 40 years old now, and I'm sure some theorist out there has written something about it in that time, so if anyone watching knows of any good papers on the subject, please send them my way. Next.
June Burney asked, what do you think is going to be the next big breakthrough in how we discuss and teach music?
Well, I'm not sure what it'll actually be, but personally, I hope it's a decline in Eurocentrism. Modern music education tends to take European musical norms as the default, and then, if it looks at other cultures at all, examines how they differ from the music of the West. Even I'm guilty of that. Just look at how I talked about ragas earlier in this video. There's just not a lot of focus on discussing these things in their own terms. When I was in college, we spent more time learning just about Beethoven than we did about the musical history, theory, and culture of the entire country of China. This leaves students with a profoundly warped impression of the importance of just a couple key figures in defining the sound of all music ever, and while European practices definitely influence modern music around the world, this has a lot more to do with who had the best guns than who had the best music, and I'd love to see curriculums incorporate more about pre-colonial musical traditions because those still matter too. Next question.
Josiah Scott asked, would you ever make a video drawing with your right hand?
Probably not. Next.
Alex St. Laurent asked, what other academic subjects do you enjoy, and how do they influence your approach to music?
I've often joked that I'm a mathematician who accidentally went to music school, and I'd say that my passion for mathematical structural reasoning is a huge part of what drew me to music theory in the first place. A lot of people talk about hearing music in their heads, but to be perfectly honest, I mostly see it. In my mind, music is largely geometric. The patterns are what interest me most. Hearing what those patterns sound like is just an added bonus. Next question.
Lou Chunks asked, my music theory teacher told us to never use parallel fifths or octaves. Why?
So first of all, parallel fifths and octaves aren't bad. They're just unsuited for certain compositional goals. Let's step back for a second though. These come up mainly in 4-part writing, which is a composition style where 4 independent melodies combine to create harmony and texture, and its theory is primarily concerned with how those melodies move relative to each other. One such kind of motion is called parallel motion, where 2 voices move the same distance in the same direction, like this. Here, the 2 notes start a major sixth apart, and they end there too. We call this parallel sixths, and it's completely fine. However, if the interval between the 2 voices is a particularly stable one, like an octave or a perfect fifth, then the 2 voices may feel like they're combining into one, blending together to create a single primary melody with a shadowy accompaniment. This is bad if you want to create the feeling of 4 distinct voices, but in other cases it may be exactly the effect you want, so feel free to use parallel fifths, just don't do it in your homework. Next.
Michael Epstein asked, any chance of doing something with John Cage's 433?
Maybe, but the problem is that from a theorist's perspective, there's not really a lot to say. 433 is an experimental piece where the performer doesn't actually play anything, and the music comes from the ambient sounds of the venue. It's really interesting, but it doesn't have much in the way of harmony, melody, or rhythms to analyze, and every performance of it will sound completely different. It's much better understood as a cultural phenomenon than a compositional one, and while I could certainly make that video, I feel like the listener's guide already did such a good job on it that I'm not sure there's much point in me weighing in. I might give it a shot at some point, but in the meantime, I linked to Steve's video in the description. Next question.
Armando Pena asked, how many people have a role in the production of your videos?
I think I've answered this before, but it's changed since then, so let's do it again. Most of the work is done by me. I'm the one talking, drawing, writing scripts, editing the audio and video, and doing a lot of other stuff. My brother Jareth is our director, making sure the shots are good and helping me decide what to draw, and he also serves as a script supervisor, reading everything to make sure it's not too technical. That's all been true for a long time, but recently we've added a second script supervisor, Jade Tan Holmes, who runs the awesome physics channel Up and Atom. She and I have started reviewing each other's scripts, and her feedback has been really helpful so far, so if you haven't seen her work, you should really check it out. And speaking of channels you should check out, I'd like to thank Jabril again for helping me out in reading the questions. His channel, Jabril's, has done some really great in-depth science and general knowledge stuff, and he's recently switched to focus more on programming, including probably the best series on machine learning I've ever seen. His content is informative, entertaining, and incredibly unique, and I highly recommend you check him out. Anyway, thanks to everyone for the questions, and thanks to you for watching. If you want early warning for the next Q&A, our Patreon patrons get notified first, and we also collect questions on Twitter, Facebook, and through our mailing list, so follow us on any of those platforms, check out our store, like, share, comment, subscribe, and above all, keep on rockin'.